Welcome to Full Beans, the podcast. I'm your host, Terry, and I've got all of the latest Formula One news to bring you. Now, it's been a while, hasn't it? It's been a few weeks since we last did a podcast. And if you haven't already, please hit that follow, like, subscribe button that you'll see in front of you whilst listening and watching this podcast to stay up to date with the latest in Formula One news. Wow, what a few weeks it's been. Name changes, summer break, Adrian Newey, all sorts going on in the world of Formula One, both personal and actually in Formula One. So, without a shadow of a doubt, let's sit down, strap in, get a coffee, and let's get right into it. Let's give it some full beans. So, first of all, let's start off with the elephant in the room, name change. Now, most of you will have, of course, by now know that the name of the channel has changed from F1 Coffee Corner to Coffee Corner Motorsport. The reason for this is because I don't want to be sued by Formula One for using F1 in my name, and I quite like my shed, and I wouldn't like someone to take it away, which they would do, because I wouldn't be able to afford to pay any fine that Formula One may give me for using their name. But on a serious note, I wasn't one of the creators who had one of these cease and desist letters. I've not seen them. I'm not too sure what they contain. However, from a safeguarding point of view, I'm a guy in a shed, drinks lots of coffee, and just enjoys making Formula One content. I really don't want the hassle or the aggravation of Formula One coming after me to shut down my channel when I make it for fun. So hence I decided to change the name. Coffee Corner Motorsport fitted, it kept Coffee Corner, and therefore a new name was born, and it also enables me to branch out into other motorsports later on if I want to do so. So it was kind of like a win-win. So that's the main reason behind the name change. I wasn't forced to do it, but likewise, I don't want to get sued by Formula One. So anyway, back to the main news. Let's get into it, because we've got a lot to cover, haven't we? We've had, Kimi Antonella's been announced by Mercedes. We've got Adrian Newey. We've got what's coming up in Baku. There's lots that's been going on in the Formula One world. And today, literally, just before I filmed this podcast, we had, of course, the news around the cost cap. Now, this is going to cause a lot of confusion online over what this is, because the FIA have released their findings for the cost cap. Now, the cost cap has found that no team has breached the cost cap. That's the first thing to remember. So out of the 10 Formula One teams, not a single team has breached the cost cap. However, there was a part two in true FIA fashion. And part two was that they found that Alpine and Honda had made a procedural breach with relation to the engine cost cap. Now, a lot of people have forgotten that this existed, or a lot of people didn't know it was coming into play now. And basically, it relates to the 2026 engine development. So anything that's cost cap related with regards to engines is not related to the current supply. It's all related to the development and introduction of the new 2026 engines. So with regards to the Honda breach, it's relating to their Aston Martin development, not their current Red Bull development. Red Bull's 2026 engines are, of course, being done by Red Bull powertrains. Now, with regards to Alpine, that relates to their one. So you could argue that maybe, they're supplying, it's their own engine, and it's supplying their current one and their future one. So maybe that's a bit more of a grey area. It remains to be seen. But a procedural breach with regards to the cost cap penalty is most likely to be around something to do with paperwork submission. So it's to do with submitting paperwork, not complying with requests, late submissions, that side of things. It's not genuinely a breach of the rules as such. It's more of a breach of the paperwork side. We saw Aston Martin and we saw Williams were found guilty of a procedural breach when the cost cap was first introduced, when, of course, Red Bull got their penalty. Theirs was the procedural breach. Williams was around a tax return, and Aston Martin's was around an accounting return. So, both sort of paperwork submissions on their front rather than breaching the actual cost cap. And the FIA have been quick to state that neither Alpine or Honda have breached the engine cost cap budget that's been set. They're both within budget. It's purely a procedural breach. What does this, of course, mean? Well, it means there'll be an ABA agreement offered by the FIA, which the teams will, the engine suppliers, I should say, rather than teams, because it relates to the engine suppliers, not the teams, they will most likely take, which will be a financial penalty. So, a few £1 million fine is what we can expect to see from this one. The details will get released when the team accept the ABA. So what will happen now is the FIA cost cap panel will meet. They will offer Alpine and Honda a ABA agreement, which will be a few £1 million fine, and it will be up to the teams whether or not they accept it. If Alpine and Honda say yes, what will happen is the FIA will release a big statement to say that they've spoken to the teams, and the teams accepted that they were wrong with their submission, and this is what the penalty is going to be. We know it's the first year of the engine supply cost cap. We know it is an extremely challenging set of regulations in terms of getting everything right and getting everything in order. So I imagine the cost cap panel will look at that side of it as well. And, that will help them decide how much the penalty should be. But I've got no doubt that both, Honda and Alpine will accept this penalty and kind of move on from it. Because, like I say, it's not a breach of the cost cap in terms of an expenditure. It's a breach of the procedure with regards to the paperwork side of it. And that's really it with the cost cap. There's a lot of talk online about, how can teams be under with so much development going on? What's going on with this? And, we expected Mercedes to be over because they produce pretty much 2 cars. McLaren with all their updates. Ultimately, the cost cap, we're now in the 3rd or 4th year of the regulations now, 3rd year, I believe. The teams have got a grip of it. They know exactly what's included in it. They know exactly what they can include, what they can't include. They also know what they can transfer out. They also know what they can move around. Let's be honest, these accountants, talk of 40-odd Mercedes accountants at one point. I imagine the top teams are employing a similar amount. They are moving money around to make sure they're under the cost cap. Rightly or wrongly, that's within the rules, and it's loopholes that the FIA are looking to close. We'll come on to some of that with Adrian and his move to Aston Martin and what that involves cost cap wise. And we also know that there's outside projects going on. There's money being moved around that side. It happens in Formula One. Whether or not we agree with it or not, it's within the current rules, and that's the point. So I know there's a lot of speculation, how is this done? We've also seen teams using more environmentally friendly methods. We've seen teams recycling updates. We've seen teams not bringing as many, not produce as many. There's all sorts going on. And the one thing I will say is, whilst there may be a common perception that because the team has brought X amount of upgrades, they're going to be over the cost cap, actually, that's not always the case. They could be saving that money elsewhere and putting it into their updates. Remember Mercedes introduced biofuel to offset their fuel costs. That fuel cost can then go on their upgrade package. It's a budget you can take from A to pay B. It doesn't matter that way. So whilst I'm not condoning the moving around of money to get into the cost cap, it's clear it happens. The FIA knows it happens, and it's currently within the regulations what money is being moved around, because ultimately it will be. Let's be honest about it. Now, let's go on to the rest of the news. Now, the biggest news, obviously, is Adrian Newey yesterday unveiled Aston Martin at its Silverstone headquarters. Now, this was a move we all saw coming in the past week or so. There was no shocker. It certainly wasn't a surprise when they unveiled Adrian. It was more of a case of when, not if, and then we all heard about this press conference. Now, if I'm honest, the press conference felt like it was to investors rather than to fans. It felt like it was Lawrence selling Aston Martin to a group of investors rather than selling it to a Formula One fan base. But Joe White, it's his team, it's his call, and Adrian is a world-class signing. He is the best at what he does. He is the most successful designer in Formula One history. So you can imagine why they wanted a big fanfare about it. So what do we know about the deal? So Adrian is moved as a managing technical partner. That's what his title is. So they will keep Dan Fallows in his role. And with this move, Adrian's got full control over the technical team at Aston Martin. So he's got, it looks like, complete hiring, firing, structure, whatever he wants to do. Now, it is a full-time role. It is a full-time Formula One role. And in fact, if you listen to the press conference yesterday, Adrian felt quite aggrieved when one of the reporters said that he was on 3 days at Red Bull. He kind of took a lot of offence by that comment, if I'm honest, when I looked at it. So it's a full-time role. It's said to be a 5-year contract, although Aston Martin haven't confirmed that. However, they have confirmed that he will be a shareholder. Now, this, going back to the cost cap we just talked about, is another accounting move. It's a clever way around things. So what the share option will be, he will be offered shares at a lower price, that sort of today's price. And then the idea being he can buy them at this price later on, and they will be worth a lot more money because hopefully by then he's designed championship winning cars and they're worth a lot more. This obviously increases retention with your higher management because you don't want to leave because you'll lose that share option, or actually you'll lose money by doing it. So the idea behind it is purely based on retention. It's also something that I feel Aston Martin have lured Adrian in with regards to other deals that are on the table, because ultimately he's now a shareholder in Aston Martin. He's got a really big incentive to make that car work, a big personal incentive to make that work. It was an offer which I think Frank Williams talked about at one point with Adrian making him a shareholder, and it never came off for various reasons. So obviously Red Bull never did it, obviously with the shares that they've got in Austria and Singapore. And for Adrian, it felt like a good move to do. It's a big money move, 20 million basic, 10 million in bonus, including that share option, so 30 million total. It's a huge move for a car designer, but it's one I can't help but feel is a bit of a bargain, as Lawrence Stroll said, when you think about what Adrian can bring. The hypercar project at Red Bull is worth 500 million to Red Bull. So if he makes one hypercar for Aston Martin, it's really paid for himself. The 300 million Oracle deal that they've got on the back of the success they've obviously had as Red Bull, if you've got success at Aston Martin, they will be delivering similar sponsorship deals and similar funding in the car. So suddenly Adrian at sort of 20 million doesn't feel like a bad price to pay, does it? Let's be honest about it. So even so, it is big money. it is a monster deal for Aston Martin. It shows how competitive they want to be. A lot of talk over driver lineup because we know they've obviously got Fernando and we know they've obviously got Lance. Lots and lots of talk online about Lance. Let's be honest about it. Ultimately, I don't think that Lance is going to get rid of Lance anytime soon. I think his desire is to see Lance winning races. I think that's the whole point of his Formula One project. So I think Lance is here for the long haul. With regards to Fernando's contracted to the end of 2026. Fernando's certainly not going to go with Adrian being here, let's be honest about it. So I think that we're going to see, at least until the end of 2026, his current driver lineup carry on. Adrian joins at the beginning of March 2025. His focus is on the 2026 car, but of course he can make changes to the 2025 car. So there's nothing to stop him once he starts work to coming in and tweaking that current car. So don't be surprised if we see a performance gain from Aston Martin next year as well, because the current cars and the current regulations is some of Adrian's designs. It will be very easy for him to come in March and say, how about changing this and doing this to make that car more competitive? So Aston Martin next year could really be a dark horse, especially if that basis and that foundation that Dan Fallows is designed on an Adrian Newey type car, which we've also heard about in the past. So do you know what? Him coming in and making a few changes might just see a McLaren-style jump for Aston Martin next year if they don't start the season off well. And Adrian's obviously on garden leave, so technically he can't do any work for Aston Martin between now and then. But the way he was recruited for Aston Martin with him and Lawrence in the gym, hey, this is Formula One. It could be a conversation, can't it? Who knows? There's no evidence of it, as everyone says. But in terms of earnest work, he can't start work until March. Now, that will be the new wind tunnel coming online. So we've heard talk that, building 2's now complete at Aston Martin. So for those who don't know, building 1 is the office spaces where the team work, all of the sort of production side of it. Building 2 is around the staff facilities. So it's around, they've got a media centre there, they've got canteen, they've got gym. It's all to do with staff welfare. That's what that block is. And building 3 is basically the new wind tunnel. That's about to come online, be commissioned by the FIA, ready for use next season and use obviously for 2026 development. Now, we've seen McLaren tell us how good that development is when you've got a new wind tunnel up and running. We've also seen the McLaren gains that they made by using that brand new wind tunnel. So actually, it could be a game changer as well. We know that when you look at Mercedes, you look at Aston Martin themselves, they obviously use Mercedes wind tunnel. A lot of these teams are clearly struggling with the older style wind tunnels and the new regulations. It's no surprise that the teams who made the most gains are actually using brand new wind tunnels. Ferrari in talks to widen theirs to upgrade theirs, so it's very similar to what Aston Martin and McLaren have got. So it will be good to see what happens with that. But yeah, with regards to Adrian move, it's a monster move. It's kind of like the last throw of dice, I think, for Lawrence. I feel that it's all or nothing. If this comes to nothing and Adrian doesn't produce a winning car, I think that Lawrence will pull his money and run. He will make money off it, ultimately, from what he paid when he saved them from liquidation. So I think from that point of view, it's kind of a safe bet, but also a good bet to make. And of course, he's got Adrian who can do other projects. There's no reason why Adrian can't look at WEC. They're looking at bringing the Valkyrie into Le Mans, all sorts of other racing series, and of course, road car developments as well. If you've got Adrian as a partner, as they put it, as a shareholder, I'm sure he will be willing to do any work he wants to. And I'm sure there's probably some of those options already on there as well. So don't be surprised to see Adrian Newey doing a lot more once he's got his feet under the table and that 2026 car's, sort of in development and on that way. What does it mean? Is Aston Martin going to be a contender? Who knows? We've got a brand new Honda engine. We've got a brand new Aston Martin car. We've got brand new regulations. It is anybody's gain. What I would say on this is what I said last night when I was doing live about it, is ultimately I would rather have Adrian Newey in my corner designing my 2026 car than not having him in my corner designing one. So you've got a better chance with Adrian designing your car than what you have with him not designing your car. So it's certainly going to be all or nothing, I think, for Aston Martin. Can a Honda produce an engine? Big question marks over the Honda power supply. We know that the Honda team isn't the same as what's in Red Bull. So when Honda announced they were leaving, a lot of people from Honda went to Red Bull powertrains. So that Honda team that you're going to get at Aston Martin isn't the same team as what's developed that Honda powertrain engine that's currently sitting in that Red Bull. So again, that's going to ask a lot of question marks. But then you've got to recruited someone like Andy Cowler, CEO, who will oversee that sort of development and has a brilliant mind when it comes to engines. Of course, in charge of that Mercedes hybrid era when Mercedes were dominant. So again, that's Lawrence making some really shrewd moves in terms of the business. He's assembled pretty much a dream team there. There is no excuses now if they don't deliver. State-of-the-art facilities, state-of-the-art designers, the best they can offer. And whilst there may be some question marks over their driver lineup, with Fernando in there, you kind of fancy their chances to be in the running if you've got a car that's competitive enough to win races. So I'm expecting to see Aston Martin jump up. Like I say, might see it next season, certainly for 2026. We saw Adrian get it right this time. No guarantee he's going to get it right this time, but like I said, I'm much rather have him in my corner. Right, what else have we got? Oh, blimey, what have we got to go? We've got drivers coming up. So we know that Ollie Behrman is coming in this weekend in place of course, Kevin Magnussen, who's serving that ban. Ollie, I think in Baku is going to find a very different proposition in Haas. It makes sense having him in there. We know he's joining next year. Obviously, we had to wait for Ferrari to give permission. But you know what? It's going to be very different for him, but very good for him. It's a challenging track, but one that, previously in F2, Ollie's done really well at. So, F2, F3, the races he's raced at previously, he's won races here. So it's a track he knows well. It's a track he should do well at. Whether or not that will transpire to the performance of Haas, I don't know. If he was kind of in that Ferrari, you'd almost fancy him to get really higher. The Haas kind of is a bit of an unknown, but it still will be good to see how he gets on. We know, of course, about Logan Sargent has been replaced by Franco Colapinto for the rest of this season. There's been a lot of talk about this, whether or not it's right to do it, whether or not they should have gone for a more established driver, a Mick Schumacher, for example. I would like to see someone like maybe Felipe Drugovich come in and give him a chance for only 9 races it was. But I understand why they've gone with Franco and the reasons why. He actually did really well at Monza. He put in a good, solid performance. I saw on his social media, he felt it in terms of his neck and the physical demands of it. But do you know what? All weekend, he was okay with it. He got settled in. He got better and better. And you'd argue it was a much better performance than what they got through Logan. So actually, in terms of car development, waiting for Carlos to come next year, could this be a really good sort of move for him in terms of getting 2 cars who may be able to get the points? They obviously picked up some points with Alex in Monza, which would be well appreciated by the team. But the thing that disappointed me I saw about Williams this week was, of course, Zach O'Sullivan not being able to finish off the F2 season due to funding issues. Now, this really disappointed me because he's, of course, a Williams Academy driver. And it's not an attack on Williams at all. For me, personally, it's the way the teams are set up. The Formula One teams are financially in a stable position. Now, with their academy drivers, those academy drivers are constantly appearing on their social media. They're appearing at events. They're helping with simulator runs. They are part of a team. Now, I know that the idea behind it is by being part of a driver academy, that will help you raise the funds that you need to compete in these junior series, and that will help you, with exposure and potentially, hopefully, get into Formula One in the future. With regards to the Zach situation, what I'm disappointed in, the likes of Williams haven't stepped in to help him. So we know that he's run out of money, and that's the reason why he can't finish the season. Now, Williams will have enough in their bank to pay for, Zach to finish his F2 season out. And for me, it just seemed like a no-brainer to why Williams wouldn't do that. Why wouldn't they just fund it for the rest of the season? Tell everyone they've done that, because actually it's a real success story. You're invested in your youth, you're invested in your driver academy. You can do it because it's outside the cost cap. Why wouldn't you just do that and let him finish the season? It's really disappointing that their answer is he's run out of money. Oh, okay. And it, for me, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't show very supportive. And I think that goes for a lot of the teams where they've got academy drivers. They need to, I think, look after them a bit more to make sure they've got adequate funding, make sure they're hosting events even if, Williams don't give them money themselves, but set up an event for Zach where he can fundraise to finish the season. There are lots of options, a factory event even, a tour of the museum with him there, a meet and greet, a dinner with him. All these things can help, with sponsorship and help increase his opportunity to finish off the Formula 2 season. So for me, that's the big disappointment that came out of that with regards to Academy. On the one hand, it's great they're supporting him in terms of Franco coming up, but actually what they've done with Zach kind of left me with a bit of a bad taste, if I'm honest, with regards to that one. We've obviously got Kimi Antonelli now confirmed at Mercedes. Again, followers of the page and followers of the channel will know that this was what I've said pretty much all season long, that it was going to happen. The only sort of caveat to that was, could Max be lured away from Red Bull? That obviously wasn't the case, so therefore we've got Kimi. Max is still being looked at for 2026. We know that Kim is on a short-term deal, or certainly an original short-term deal with a longer-term option. So most likely a break clause at the end of 2025 to enable Toto to do pretty much what he wants. We know George has also got a contract that expires at the end of 2025 as well. So I think there's a bit of wiggle room deliberately for Toto on that one. Obviously had an absolute nightmare in Monza FP1 session, replacing George, went out, put it into the wall. For me personally, that's got to be looked at from a Mercedes point of view. They gave him the soft tyres. They pretty much gave him the green light to go and push, and he put it in the wall. What they should have done was ease him in. They should have got him to do some laps where he was comfortable before he pushed it. He was always going to want to make a name for himself. He was always going to want to put on a show. It's his home Grand Prix. It's his first time in a competitive, current, up-to-date Formula One car. If you give him soft tyres and give him permission to push, what's he going to do? He's going to push. So I think the team have to own that a bit. I think they have. Will it dent his confidence? I don't think so. He's a young driver. They don't tend to be short of confidence at all. I found Toto's comments quite funny when he was saying, "Oh, it's because he was too fast." No such thing, Toto. No such thing. You've got to be able to control it as well. So I found that very much a tongue-in-cheek Toto comment. We know he's going to get Lewis's car for Mexico in FP1 there, so he's going to get no out in for next year. Is it too early? Massive debate on this. Ultimately, doesn't matter. He's coming. He will make mistakes. We know from when younger drivers come into Formula One, when Max was in Formula One, when sort of Seb in his early days, Lewis in his early days, we know these rookies make mistakes, and they will make mistakes. The spotlight is going to be on them a lot more at a higher end team than what it would be at a Williams, for example. But ultimately, as long as he learns from them mistakes, then that's the way it's going to be. He's going to be fast. He's no doubt an amazing talent. And I think definitely in a few years' time, he's going to be a contender if there's a car that puts him in that position. George needs to be worried, because if Kimi starts beating George next season, which we've seen in the past, Lewis and Fernando, it can happen. Rookies coming in, no fear, raw pace, don't really care about the politics of Formula One, just want to win races, just want to beat their teammate, just want to show their top dog. George could be in a lot of bother if Kimi starts beating him and beating him regularly. It could be a problem for him. We can't talk teammates and not talk about papaya rules, of course, and what we saw last time out with obviously Oscar and Lando. It's one of those where I think if Lando's going to win the championship, he's going to need a lot of help, either from Max DNFing or finishing out the points, and potentially Oscar giving him that help. Now, I understand why Oscar's reluctant to do this. Now, there's a bit of talk about not having a number 2 status in his contract, which Mark Webber's put in. For me, it's a bit more simpler. If Lando wins the Drivers' Championship, he's going to have that power over Oscar. Now, Oscar doesn't want to give him that, or certainly not want to give him that voluntarily, because McLaren have raised this whole profile of we got 2 number 1 drivers, which we all know bites you in the ass at some point. Let's be honest about it. What team has been successful with 2 number 1 drivers? Hardly any. Because somewhere along the line, it goes boom. It blows up in your face. And this is exactly what's happening at McLaren. Now that, Oscar's getting better and better with his tyre management, more use of the tracks, more competitive, we're now seeing him come up to a level, which we all knew he was going to do because of the talent that he's got, because their car's good. Now, this season, you're going to have to ask him to help Oscar out, but help Lando out. But if he helps Lando out next season, Lando's going to say, well, I'm the world champion, so I want number 1 status. That's natural for a driver. So this is where I think Oscar's reluctance is coming from. With regards to McLaren, they just want the constructors, and the drivers is a bonus. But you know what? The constructors is what pays you money, pays your bonus, pays your sponsors. So they're not overly fussed, really, if Lando doesn't get the Drivers' Championship. They would like it, because everyone likes to say that you're a Drivers' World Champion. But it's not the be-all and end-all for them. If they get the constructors and don't get the drivers, they're not going to lose much sleep over it at all. Lando will lose more sleep over it. It's important to Lando because there will be bonus for him related to it. There'll be contract negotiations coming up where he can negotiate a higher salary, obviously being a Formula One world champion. There's lots of personal stuff for Lando to do it. But in terms of McLaren as a team, the constructors is the one that's important to him. That's the one they want. That's the magic number for him in terms of prize money, status, all of those things. When you ask a team at the beginning of the season, they say the constructors championship is first and foremost, and then the drivers' championship is secondary to that. That's common sense. But I feel there's trouble brewing at McLaren. I feel that, this Oscar isn't happy to play second fiddle. Mark Webber certainly isn't happy for him to play second fiddle. I don't think he will very easily. It's one of those situations where I can see it's given me Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton vibes, if I'm honest, of just blowing up at some point, and may just force McLaren to have to make a long-term choice over which driver they have, which is something we all warned about was going to happen, and it just won't be coming to them a lot quicker than what they first thought, with that car being so competitive now. But it's going to be really good to see how the rest of this season plays out, whether or not Oscar plays a supporting role or whether or not he carries on, like that cheeky move he pulled at the last race and take the lead and take the points. Because should he have let him back through? Part of me says yes. They weren't going for the win, if I'm honest. From McLaren's point of view, it would have been good payback for what Lando did in Hungary. So actually, maybe asking the question should have been done it. We know he was going to catch Charles, because he wasn't close enough. Certainly about 3 laps before the end, you could see he wasn't catching Charles at a rate enough to warrant keeping him ahead of Lando from that point of view. So a swap would have been easy to do, and also I'm not too sure a lot of McLaren fans would have begrudged that, because the teams still would have got the same amount of points, and you're not cheating Oscar out of a win, you're moving him from second to third. So it's a move I think they could have made. Baku this weekend, they've got no Zach Brown on the pit wall again. He's doing IndyCar. We know that's where the problems happened in Hungary when Zach wasn't around. So that might be a problem this weekend if they're in that situation again. Whether or not Andrea can do that, whether or not it's an Andrea team management problem, or whether or not the team orders come from Zach or not. A lot of confusion, a lot of time over who runs the team. We've heard that before. So it will be a point to see whether or not these appear with Zach obviously out the picture as well. What else we got? We got the vacant Sauber seat that's still up for grabs. So we know that Sauber seat is still available. They've got pretty much their pick of anybody now, haven't they? So my money is on Bottas getting a short-term deal to keep him going through. Lots of other talk about youngsters coming in as well. I'm not sure they're going to go down that route. I think that with Bottas and Joe, they got 2 drivers who they would probably choose, certainly for next year. So even if it's a short contract, we know that Joe's come out and said he's happy to take a 1-year contract. We know that Valtteri wants a longer-term contract to see how he come on board. I don't know what they're thinking. Joe brings them more money. Bottas is an established figure, but a youngster potentially with some sponsorship could open up the doors when they've got someone established like Nico Hülkenberg coming as well. So I'm not too sure where they're going to go. My money at the moment is currently on Bottas, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that one pivot around. We've even seen Mick Schumacher put in the mix. I think that's an outside bet. I think Mick's time in Formula 1 maybe at an end. I think that Williams sort of deal was a nail in the coffin for him. But we also know that Binotto was part of obviously Ferrari when Mick was there, so he's got links with a lot of drivers. I don't know the impact that Jonathan Wheatley is going to have. Obviously still at Red Bull doing his garden leave as well. So whether or not he's going to have an input or he's just going to have to go with what he's got, and maybe that might explain why there's going to be short-term driver change, because they're waiting for him to come on board. He's not due until sort of middle of next year's time. And then, of course, we got the ongoing VCARB situation. I'm expecting Liam Lawson to be announced at some point as a driver, leaving, of course, one seat with Red Bull potentially free. I mean, at the moment, it's Checo's. He's in the contract. He's got a new contract. I think all of Checo's break clauses come at the end of the season. I think they can take stock of it then and see whether they can break the contract or not. I think that with regards to Daniel, that's probably where their mind is at. I think Liam will come into partner Yuki for VCARB next year. Max is obviously staying, and I think they will come at the end of the season. They will look at where they are, where Daniel's performances have been, and is there room to move or not. But I still think that they might keep with Checo. I think the financial gain for keeping Checo is very high. I know Daniel's got a lot of marketability. I then can't see Daniel doing a reserve role. I can see him going off to do other things. We've seen he's executive producer on a comedy show. He's got his outside businesses. I can see him branching off into that and moving away from it and maybe racing somewhere else if he doesn't get that Red Bull seat. But I think that Red Bull needs to name Liam Lawson somewhere. I think that's caused them a big headache. And he's obviously in the name for Sauber as an outside bet for that one as well. But I would imagine that he's got a move sorted. Otherwise, we'd be hearing a bit more about that because he would be free to talk to anyone else. So those are the 2 seats left on the grid. If I had to put money on it today, I would go Liam Lawson in the VCARB, and I would go Valtteri Bottas for the vacant stake seat. So we remain to see if that guess is right on that front. And I think that's pretty much it for all this the news that we got. Nothing really else is going on. We've got Baku this week. Let's have a look at the Bruce Jones book to see what a Baku preview looks like. So here we go. Even Formula One insiders didn't know what to expect when the World Championship announced that it would be heading to Azerbaijan in 2016. Many even had to locate it on the map. However, they all know where it is now, and the street circuit through its capital Baku provides a refreshingly different backdrop as well as a difficult and surprisingly high-speed track layout. Starting on a broad straight opposite alongside a park that lines the coastline to the Caspian Sea, the track feeds quickly into a pair of 90-degree left-handers. A short straight follows, but there's little chance of overtaking into turn 3, as that's another 90-degree left, again hemmed in by the walls. Turn 4 is a right-hander, followed by a chicane and a right at turn 7. Then the nature of the circuit changes entirely, as the spacious blocks of the new town are followed by a narrowing of the track as it turns left and runs uphill past the walls of the city down. At turn 10, the track bursts back into a wider area and then begins to open out after turn 12, with tight corners followed by more open ones. Open kinks to the left at turns 13 and 14, which are taken in 8th gear, and then a tighter one at turn 15. Continuing past the city's grandest buildings, the drivers are presented with a sudden drop out of turn 16. The cars plunge over the edge and running flat out through 4 kinks before being fed back onto the start line finish straight, where they continue to accelerate onto 200 miles an hour, or 320 kilometers per hour, for all of those who work on those metrics, before having to think about braking heavily and perhaps trying a passing move down into turn 1. Previous winners of the track, quite interestingly, only Mercedes and Red Bull have ever won in Baku. So we had Nico Rosberg 2016, Daniel Ricciardo in 2017, Lewis Hamilton 2018, Valtteri Bottas 2019, Sergio Perez in 2021. We obviously didn't go there in 2020. Max Verstappen in 2022, and Sergio Perez in 2023. It's a 3.731 mile track, 6.003 kilometres, and it has 51 laps. The pole time of 2023 was Charles Leclerc, 1 minute 40.203, and the fastest lap is George Russell in the Mercedes, set in 2023 of 1 minute 43.370. The lap record is held by Charles Leclerc back in 2019, which is a 1 minute 43.009. So there you have it. That is your Baku quick guide to what's happening this weekend. What can we expect? It's not a big upgrade track. I don't imagine a lot of upgrades coming for this weekend. We know that first corner, if you're a Lewis fan, you'll be haunted by him leaving the magic on, obviously in that 2021 fight. So I think what we're going to see a tight race. I think McLaren are going to be in the mix. Ferrari, with their upgrades in Monza, they were very specific Monza upgrades. Will there be enough to take into Baku? I'm not too sure, but they're going to be a factor, especially on those big, long straights. Mercedes will be in amongst it, but I think that, the Red Bulls with Max Verstappen will come in. We know that Red Bull and Ferrari want to introduce a new flexi front wing. We know that the other teams have got it. The FIA has said that these are now legal. They've done the checks on them so far. They're continuing those checks, but they say currently, as it is, those front wings are legal. So expect to see an upgrade from Red Bull and Ferrari being rushed to the track, which flex a lot more than what their current ones do to put them into contention. They queried it with the FIA. A lot of people said it was a complaint. It was more of a query before they went down that development route and spent a lot of money on developing a flexible front wing just for the FIA to outlaw it. With the FIA saying that it's valid and it's current and it's ongoing, they're going to rush that development through and get it to the track in hope it brings performance gains. We know that Red Bull are talking about their next upgrade package being around Austin time, so a few races to go before we see that one. And we know that traditionally we've got this one and obviously Singapore next week. We know they are not happy hunting grounds for the Red Bull team, so expect to see maybe McLaren trying to capitalise on that and get Lando in a position where he can put the pressure on Max, just to see how Max reacts under that sort of pressure. He's not been under that for the past couple of seasons, even though he's been obviously the World Championship winner. It's not been a close title battle, certainly last season wasn't. So it will be really good to see how he reacts under that sort of pressure. And I think that's what McLaren are trying to do, make sure they can put the pressure on both him and Red Bull in terms of constructors and see where they get to on that one. But one thing for sure to look out for, Colapinto, how's he going to do with his first time? How is Ollie Behrman going to do in the Haas with regards to being in the Ferrari? Are Ferrari's upgrades Monza specific, or actually will they produce a lot more? And who is going to pull it into the wall at the castle section? Because we can guarantee somebody is. So expect to see the safety car in action this weekend. And I think that's all I've got for you this week. Whistle stop tour of the world of Formula One. I don't think there's too much else going on. Let me just quickly check, make sure I'm not missing anything blatant. Alpine and their engine supply, we just quickly touched on that one. So they're still waiting for a decision on whether or not they're going to carry on or not with their 2026 engine supply. We know they're in talks with Mercedes over a engine supply on that one. We know their staff in France are obviously protesting because they feel a bit hard done by with that one. I think they will switch to Mercedes engine. They're giving all the signs that they're going to switch. I think that what we're seeing now with this talk of actually we've got a couple of weeks deadline, it's just them waiting to pass the time, let it die down a bit, and then I think they're going to announce it. Flavio Briatore has been brought in for this reason. It feels like a team that wants to be sold. They're telling us it's not going to be sold. High Tech are looking like maybe an outside bet. High Tech have got a court case against the FIA and Formula One for their failed 2026 bid. It's against the FIA, if I remember rightly, because Formula One hadn't said yes to the bid or anything. So I think it's against the FIA. That is going to probably most likely be a settlement. The talk is they've asked for what they spent back as compensation. That's what they're asking the courts to decide on. They're saying that the amount of money they've already spent on their failed bid, they should get back from the FIA in terms of compensation. If they get that, that probably gives them a financial sort of buffer to try and take over Alpine. We know that they've obviously got, the founder of High Tech is now the team principal of Alpine. No coincidence maybe on that one. Is this the bid that's on up? We all thought it was going to be Andretti, but actually is it going to be a High Tech takeover? That could be on the cards. I still think Alpine are going to be taken over at some point. They're not making the noise of a team who wants to stay in Formula One at all. Certainly no one higher up is. So I think that's going to be interesting. Andretti are carrying on with their Formula One push, but with no signs of entering Formula One. But they're still recruiting, still developing, still going. It don't make any sense to me unless they've got some out their sleeve. So I really want to see what Andretti's next steps are, and I really think that Alpine are key to it. So that's, I think, one to keep an eye on because, like I say, despite their current talk of not being sold, they're certainly giving me vibes of a team that's going to be sold. I think that's it. I've talked for far too long, over 37 minutes. Like I said at the top of the show, if this is your first time to the Four Beans podcast, please drop a like or subscribe, whatever button's available to you, wherever you're listening and watching this on. I really appreciate it. It helps get the podcast out there, helps boost up the charts, and helps get more people listening. And for those who have tuned in on a regular basis, I thank you once again, and I'll catch you all on the next show.